Rain pounded the city streets, neon lights reflecting off puddles as Maya gripped the handlebars of her rickety motorcycle stuck in a jam that stretched endlessly in every direction, her heart racing, every second ticking like a countdown to disaster, her last delivery slipping further from her grasp, panic clawing at her chest. She glanced at her watch. She couldn't afford to be late. Not today, not with everything riding on this shift. Then she saw it, a flash of black metal twisted against concrete. A young man sprawled on the wet asphalt, unconscious, blood mixing with the rain. And the crowd surrounding him did nothing, their phones capturing the moment while life hung in the balance. Maya's stomach twisted, the voice of her grandmother echoing in her mind. In a storm, be the shelter, not just another drop of rain. And something inside her snapped. She pushed through the crowd, her hands working to lift the man onto her bike, her jacket soaked, her gloves trembling, weaving through the halted cars with him pressed against her back, determination burning through fear. She didn't think about the money lost, or the boss who would scream at her tomorrow, only that someone had to act, someone had to care. If you want to see what happens next, if you want to witness courage in the rain, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below, because Maya's story is only just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Maya bent over her old motorcycle, hands shaking as she tied down a large, shivering food bag, water soaking through her jacket, cold running down her spine. Yet her eyes were steady, sharp, full of fire. For she carried more than orders tonight. She carried hope, her little dream tucked in her heart, a course she longed to take, a life she longed to change. She thought of her tiny apartment, a cramped little box in the old part of the city, walls smelling of damp and dust, yet spotless, neat, holding her few treasures, worn books with frayed pages, and a photograph of her grandmother, eyes gentle, hands strong, the only family she had. And she whispered softly, "I will not let this rain wash me away. I will make it through." She mounted the bike, the engine coughing and whining like an old beast, and she rode into the chaos, streets slick with water, neon lights dancing like spirits on the puddles, cars honking, horns wailing, drivers shouting. But Maya moved calm, almost like she was gliding, weaving between danger, her mind focused, counting every breath, every heartbeat, remembering her grandmother's words, "The world will push, the world will test, but you are stronger than its storms." She delivered the first bag, the customer barely looking up, muttering thanks like the words were heavy stones. Then the second, rain pouring harder, like sky itself weeping for someone, anyone. And the last stop loomed ahead, a tall building, glass walls glowing with warmth she could almost taste, her mind already on home, on tea steaming in a chipped cup, on the quiet corner where she could rest. But the streets were alive, trembling under the rain, and Maya felt a shiver, not from cold, but from something unseen, something waiting, a story about to start that would not let her go. And she rode on, heart thudding, rain lashing, her eyes sharp, for in the city's wet heart, a night of testing, of courage, and of secrets was waiting for her. Maya turned the sharp corner near the old industrial park, tires sliding slightly on the wet asphalt, rain pounding her helmet like 1,000 tiny drums, her heart already racing from the last delivery when she heard it. A sound that cut through the storm like a knife, screeching tires, metal twisting, glass shattering, a scream that had no voice, and she skidded, braking hard, eyes widening as a sleek black car flew from nowhere and slammed into the concrete barrier, the sound echoing in the empty streets like the city itself had gasped, smoke rising from the crumpled hood, engine growling in pain, and Maya froze for a heartbeat, rain skimming her face, then pushed forward, weaving through the into puddles, the smell of burning rubber filling her nose. And when she reached the scene, a small crowd had already gathered, their faces pale, their phones raised, fingers tapping, murmuring, "Did you get it? That's $1 million car." But not a single hand reached out to help. Not a single person moved closer to the twisted metal, and Maya's stomach churned, blood pounding in her ears. She muttered under her breath, "How can they just stand there?" She pressed through the edges of the crowd, rain soaking her jacket, hair plastered to her face, eyes locking on the man inside, slumped over the wheel, blood and rain mixing on his face, the shiny cuff of his shirt drenched, his breath shallow, almost gone. And she yelled, "Someone call an ambulance, please, hurry!" A man shouted back, "Already on the way, but 20 minutes in this storm." Maya's chest tightened. 20 minutes too long for the river of water rising around the car, too long for the pipe gushing near the barrier, creating a small lake that could swallow him whole. And in that instant, her grandmother's words came to her like a bell through the wind. "In a storm, be the shelter, not just another drop of rain." And Maya felt something break inside, a courage she didn't know she carried, her hands trembling, but her mind sharp. She parked her bike roughly, leaving it in the mud, and pushed through the crowd, her voice steady. "Move, step back, I need space." Someone flinched, almost dropping their phone. Another whispered, "Who does she think she is?" She ignored them. She couldn't stop. Her eyes on the man, on life. And she tried the door, jammed, metal twisted like a trap. She cursed under her breath, rain running into her eyes, and a bystander hesitated, fingers frozen on his phone. She grabbed him by the collar. "Put that phone down and use your hands, now." He stammered, fear making his body stiff, but he obeyed. And together they wrenched the door, a shriek of metal splitting the rain, and finally it gave, swinging just enough. She reached in, feeling the man's chest rising and falling faintly, too faintly, and she muttered, hold on, you will live, I promise." Words barely audible over the storm, but she spoke them like spells, believing them, knowing that believing could sometimes tip fate. She helped him out, tall, heavy, expensive suit soaked through, body limp. She hoisted him onto her bike, heart hammering, her arms straining, holding him close, the smell of rain and blood and leather mixing. She felt his weight like the weight of the world, but she didn't falter, weaving through cars stuck in water, through honking horns, the crowd still gawking, phones still flashing, and she whispered to him, "You will see home again, I swear it. Don't give up, not yet." And a young boy on the sidewalk shouted, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She gave him a quick nod, no time for prelatries, only urgency, only life, only the storm that could drown or deliver them. And as she rode through the city, water spraying from tires, neon lights glimmering like spirits on puddles, she realized the world was watching, but it wasn't watching the cameras, it was watching her courage. Every twist of her body, every second she held him upright, every heartbeat counting down the minutes to the hospital. And she whispered again, grandmother's voice in her ears, "In a storm, be the shelter." And she was the storm's shelter tonight, carrying life on her back, racing against fate itself. Rain lashing, heart beating, hope clinging, and the city, cold and indifferent, seemed to pause, holding its breath as Maya fought for a life that no one else would save. The hospitals smelled of antiseptic and fear, bright lights reflecting on wet floors like stars trapped inside a box, and Maya moved through it all as if she were part of the storm itself, soaked, shivering, but her hands steady, her eyes sharp, giving the staff the man's phone and his ID, fingers trembling slightly. "He needs help, quickly," she said, voice low but firm, and a nurse looked at the ID, eyes widening, a gasp almost escaping. "Alexander Kane?" Maya didn't answer, didn't pause, didn't look, her mind already racing, already planning her next move. She stayed in the waiting room like a shadow, watching the doctors disappear with him, monitors beeping, feet hurrying, machines whirring, each second stretching like the edge of a knife, her chest tight, rainwater dripping from her jacket onto the tiles, blending with the sterile puddles. She whispered softly to herself,
Please, hold on. You must live. Remembering her grandmother's words, the smallest hands can hold the greatest weight when the heart is brave. And she waited, calm on the outside, storm inside, until a nurse finally emerged, relief on her face. He's stable. Surgery is underway. Maya nodded once, barely a movement, soaked, tired, heart still racing, and without a word, without a name, she turned, letting the automatic doors sweep her into the night, rain hitting her again, colder now, washing away the city's chaos, but not the echo of the life she had saved, disappearing like a whisper, a shadow in the storm, leaving behind only the faintest trace of courage, the memory of a young woman who chose to act when everyone else only watched. The morning sun cut through the city haze, pale and harsh, but it could not warm the chill that clung to Maya as she walked into the Quick Bite hub, tired bones and wet clothes still clinging to her like memories of the storm. And there he was, Mr. June, face purple, veins bulging, eyes like coals ready to burn. And before she could speak, before she could explain a single thing, he shoved a printout at her, paper shaking in his fingers. Customer complained, 3-star rating, undelivered food, you cost me money, Maya. His voice sharp, slicing through her chest like a knife. And Maya felt the words settle in her bones, cold and heavy. Yet she said nothing. Not a word, not a plea. For what could she say to a man whose world was counted in dollars and ratings, not in courage or lives saved? And he went on, cruel and precise. You're fired. Effective now. Last week's pay, consider it lost to cover the damage. And her heart tightened, chest heavy, pride swelling like a storm, her mind flashing to the man in the rain, the life she had carried on her back, the choices that mattered. And she looked at Mr. June, saw nothing but the walls of a small, petty world, and held her silence like a shield, too proud to explain, too weary to argue. And without a word, she turned, boots squelching on wet concrete, her soaked jacket clinging, and stepped into the daylight. The sun too bright, the air too sharp, the world suddenly larger and emptier, jobless but unbroken, carrying with her a storm of courage that no firing, no insult, no small-minded man could ever take away. Walking on, rain still in her hair, hope still in her heart, and the city waiting for the story that had just begun. The days stretched long and heavy for Maya, each one folding into the next like gray clouds in a sky that never cleared, and she moved through them quietly, taking odd jobs wherever she could, sweeping streets, carrying parcels, anything to keep the small hope in her pocket alive. Her savings thinning like water slipping through fingers, and each coin counted, each meal measured, the dream of her course shrinking with each passing day, whispering like a bird trapped in a cage, almost gone, almost forgotten. Until one afternoon, a knock at her door startled the silence, and there it was, a letter, thick, heavy, cream-colored, almost glowing in her hands, sealed with care, weight pressing her palms, and she opened it slowly, eyes widening, heart thudding, for it was not a simple invitation, not a casual note, but a summons, an order to appear at the Great Falcon Global Holdings, the city's tallest tower, shining like a palace of glass and steel, a place she had only seen from afar, a kingdom of power she had never entered. And at the bottom, in careful, precise script, the signature of Alexander Kane's personal secretary. And Maya read it again, disbelief mingling with fear and hope, for this was not an offer, it was a call, a choice she had not expected, a chance to step into a world that had once been nothing but stories whispered above the rooftops. And she held the paper to her chest, rain from earlier storms still clinging to her jacket, whispering to herself, This is the moment, the turning of the river, the hand of the storm. And somewhere deep inside, her grandmother's voice echoed softly, "When the world calls, answer with courage, child, for it is not the place, but the heart that carries you through." Maya stepped into the Falcon Global Tower and the world seemed to tilt, glass and steel reaching higher than the clouds, shining like the teeth of a great beast, and she felt small, painfully small, in her simple cotton dress, the only one she owned that could pass for decent, soaked from rain that had followed her like a shadow, heart hammering in her chest, palms clammy, breath uneven. And the private elevator swallowed her whole, walls of polished metal reflecting her nervous face, whisking her up, through the sky, until the city below became a patchwork of lights and rivers, streets she had ridden 1,000 times, now tiny, distant, almost like a map someone had drawn in gold. And she clutched the strap of her bag, whispering softly, "Do not stumble, child. Do not let fear run your steps." And the doors opened to a reception that seemed made of air and sunlight, minimalist perfection, glass stretching from floor to ceiling, steel polished until it mirrored the clouds. The view breathtaking, almost cruel in its beauty, and she swallowed hard, adjusting her dress, smoothing it against her damp skin, feeling like a visitor in a kingdom that did not belong to her, yet knowing she had been called, summoned, and summoning courage from somewhere deep inside, she stepped forward. And the door beside the reception opened quietly, and there he was, Alexander Kane, taller than she remembered, shoulders broad, movements precise, a scar near his temple, pale, a reminder of the night she had carried him through the storm, and his eyes, sharp, intelligent, warm in a way that made her catch her breath. And he studied her as she studied him, silence stretching between them, the only sound of the faint hum of the city below. And he finally spoke, words deliberate, each one landing like stones in a river. "Maya," he said, voice low but steady, "you pulled me from a car that would have become my coffin in 7 more minutes. The doctors said the angle of the impact, I would not have lasted until the ambulance." And Maya's hands clenched in her lap, the words washing over her, a mix of fear, pride, and disbelief. And he continued, eyes never leaving hers, "You acted when everyone else watched. No one else moved. You did not wait for orders. You did not hesitate. You saved a life." He reached into a drawer, producing an envelope, thick, heavy, and he slid it across the sleek table toward her, and she saw the check inside, an amount that made her stomach twist, numbers she had never imagined, enough to buy a house, enough to pay for her course 10 times over, enough to live comfortably for years without worry. And her mind spun, heart racing, yet she looked at him, eyes steady despite the storm of thoughts inside. I can't," she whispered, voice shaking, caught between gratitude and principle. And he raised a hand, curious, patient, not angered. "You do not have to explain yet," he said softly. "I only wish to honor what you did, truly. Most would take it and move on. But you acted without thought of reward." Maya swallowed, thinking of the rain, of the crowd that had only watched, of the fear that had nearly frozen her, and she whispered, almost to herself, "I did what anyone should do." And he smiled faintly, a smile that carried relief, admiration, and something she could not name. And the room seemed to pause, the streets outside holding its breath, as 2 worlds collided, the streets she had known, soaked with rain and danger, and this tower of glass and steel, cold and distant, yet in this moment bound together by a single act of courage. And Maya felt the weight of it all, dizzying, humbling, terrifying, yet strange and beautiful. And Alexander Kane, watching her, knew that no wealth, no power, no luxury could ever capture the courage that she carried in her small, trembling hands. And silence settled between them, thick, almost sacred, the city humming below, waiting for her next word, for the choice she would make. And he studied her, patience in his posture, respect in his eyes, then asked gently, "Tell me about your life, Maya, your job, what drives you?" And she spoke matter-of-factly, voice steady despite the storm inside. "I worked as a delivery girl, sir. Quick bite. I was fired for failing an order I could not complete because someone needed my help. That is all." He nodded slowly, listening, truly listening. And for the first time in years he saw it, the exhaustion etched in the lines of her face, the weight she carried on her small shoulders, but beneath it, something stronger, unyielding, a core of steel no storm could bend. And he said softly, "I understand. My personal assistant quit last week. The job is chaotic, hours long. The world will throw you to the wolves. But there is a salary, health insurance, stability, and a chance. Take it, or leave the check on the table. Your choice." Maya's chest tightened, the decision pressing down like the rain that night, yet something flickered inside, a spark of courage, of curiosity, of challenge, and she nodded once, slowly. "I'll take it." The first days were a trial by fire, a storm unlike any she had known. And Maya learned quickly that the streets had not prepared her for the towers of glass and steel, the cold, polished floors, the whispers of assistants in heels and silk. "Did you hear? She used to deliver food," they said, voices laced with judgment. And she heard it all, but her spine remained straight, her eyes focused, her mind sharp. And security tested her patience, scanning her ID with suspicion, challenging her presence. And middle managers handed her tasks with sneers, subtle humiliation hidden in mundane work. But Maya did what she had always done, honed by years of survival in streets that gave nothing and demanded everything. She anticipated, solved, moved quietly, efficiently, her hands working faster than eyes could follow, her mind calculating, her heart steady. And even when the others mocked, whispered, or scowled, she never complained, never flinched, only grew stronger, sharper, a force beneath the calm. And slowly, imperceptibly, the empire that had seemed cold and unyielding began to bend slightly around her, recognizing her worth, not in titles, not in pedigree, but in quiet intelligence, street wisdom, and courage. And though the path was harsh, though the world of Falcon Global was a storm unlike the one she had ridden through on her motorcycle, Maya knew she could endure, she could survive, she could rise. Because she had carried life on her back once, through rain and blood and fear, and she would carry it again, through boardrooms, whispers, and glass towers, until the world understood what the streets had always known. Courage cannot be bought, and heart cannot be measured by wealth. At first, Maya and Alexander's world was one of cold efficiency. Each interaction clipped and precise, reports handed across a gleaming desk, instructions sharp, words measured like tools in a workshop. No warmth, no pause, no space for error. Yet every day she learned the rhythm, the steps, the patterns of a life so unlike the streets she had ridden, and she moved quietly, doing what was asked, solving problems before they became crises, her eyes alert, mind calculating, heart steady, while Alexander, tall, controlled, always assessing, always watching, gave curt replies, nods, small grunts of approval. And in that cold exchange, a tiny seed of understanding took root, unnoticed, almost invisible, until one night, late, hours past the city's heartbeat, Alexander snapped, frustration flaring like lightning across the office. A minor mistake, a report misfiled, and his voice, usually calm, cracked, sharp. "How could you miss this detail? It's critical." The words striking like hail against her chest. Yet Maya did not flinch, did not shrink. She watched him for a long moment, seeing the storm behind his eyes, the weight he carried, the exhaustion pressing him down. And quietly she rose,
hands steady, and placed in front of him a cup of tea, dark, fragrant, thick, the strongest and sweetest she had ever made, the tea she drank during her long night shifts. And she said softly, "My grandmother used to say, a storm in the mind needs sweetness to settle." And he looked at her, surprise flickering, confusion. And then he drank, slowly, each sip drawing out the tension, and something broke in the air, a crack in the armor of years, and he exhaled, shoulders slumping, eyes softening, voice low. I apologize. You were right to notice." It was the first genuine apology he had given in years, and the room seemed lighter, quieter, and Maya smiled faintly, a small flicker, knowing that bridges could be built from the smallest of moments. And from that night, the quiet moments began, subtle, fragile, growing stronger, as he asked her, curiosity softening the edges of his command, "Tell me about your grandmother. What was she like?" And she spoke, stories spilling like water from her lips, tales of love and laughter, discipline and fire. A woman who had raised her with hands worn but gentle, eyes sharp, teaching courage and kindness together. And he listened, leaning back, absorbing, asking questions, connecting the dots. And then he spoke of his own world, the weight of his name, the life that everyone wanted a piece of but no one truly saw. And he confessed, the loneliness that had shadowed him since childhood, the father who measured men by profit, by results, by loyalty that could be bought, not earned. And Maya listened, silent, heart aching for the man behind the suit, the billionaire trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. And the trust between them grew, invisible threads weaving slowly, as Alexander began keeping her late, not because he needed her presence, but because he valued her perspective, her street-smart honesty, the way she saw what others overlooked, her words cutting through boardroom polish, her thoughts sharp, refreshing, impossible to ignore. And for Maya, each quiet moment in his office, each conversation that lingered past business, revealed the man beneath the empire, a part of him the world never saw, his kindness hidden beneath power, his patience beneath authority. And the respect between them deepened, quietly, imperceptibly, into something more, an unspoken affection heavy with possibility. The kind of bond forged not in grandeur or wealth, but in understanding, in shared stories, in the courage to speak truth to the storm. And each night, as the city slept beneath rain or star, the two of them sat in silence sometimes, sipping tea, talking quietly, learning the language of each other's hearts, a language richer than contracts, more binding than duty. And the walls of glass and steel around them could not contain the truth of what had begun, a connection neither could name, yet both felt with every glance, every word, every shared breath, the quiet unfolding of a storm that promised warmth, courage, and the slow fire of a heart finally seen. The night was alive with gold and crystal, the kind of night that made the city itself feel small beneath the glittering chandeliers. And Maya stood at the entrance of the Falcon Global Foundation Gala, heart hammering, palms clammy, breath caught between fear and awe, for she had never walked among such wealth, such power, such polished faces that smiled with sharp teeth hidden behind diamonds. And Alexander stood beside her, tall, steady, calm, yet she felt the weight of the room pressing down like rain on tin roofs. And he had asked her to come, to be real by his side, to be the truth in a sea of polished lies. And she had agreed, not fully knowing what it meant, but knowing somehow that this was her place too, because courage had carried her once through rain and blood, and it could carry her again through whispered contempt and haughty stares. And she wore the dress they had found together, simple, elegant, modest, a tiny rebellion against the glittering uniforms of wealth that surrounded her. And as they stepped into the grand ballroom, the music seemed to falter for a heartbeat, as if even the orchestra paused to take measure of her. And eyes turned, dozens of them, hundreds, sharp and curious, some filled with amusement, others with judgment, whispers slithering like snakes through the crowd. "Is that his new assistant? I heard she was a delivery driver. Poor thing, she must be so lost." The women in diamonds staring with thinly veiled pity, the men leaning closer, evaluating her like a specimen. And Maya's chest tightened, heart hammering like a drum, yet she held her head high, remembering the streets, the rain, the lives she had carried, and she felt small, yes, but unbroken, as Alexander guided her forward, confident, protective, calm in a storm of sneers and whispers. And then Victoria Ashford appeared, smiling a smile that did not reach her eyes, voice dripping with condescension, stepping close, speaking slowly as if to a child. "It's so brave of you to come."
The city must seem so different from up here, doesn't it, dear? Maya's fingers tightened around her clutch, eyes flicking toward Alexander, seeking the anchor she had learned to trust. And before she could answer, before the words could form in her throat, he stepped forward, tall, calm, every muscle controlled, voice low but carrying across the ballroom, edge of steel cutting through the whispers. Maya sees the city more clearly from the streets than most of us ever will from our penthouses. She saw me when others only saw a spectacle to be recorded for profit. And the words fell like thunder, a declaration not just of gratitude, but of choice, of loyalty, of recognition. And the crowd froze, the music faltering, glasses held midway to lips, jaws tightening, for Alexander had chosen her side, openly, publicly. And Maya's chest swelled with a strange mixture of fear and pride, eyes meeting his, unspoken words passing between them, trust, understanding, and the bond, fragile and secret for so long, caught fire in that single moment, the air thick with tension, admiration, and the spark of something neither could name. And Victoria's smile faltered, sharp eyes narrowing, while the others whispered, some in awe, some in disbelief. And Maya stood tall, heart steady, remembering the girl on the streets, the girl who ran through rain to save a life. And she realized, in the glitter and the judgment, that courage and truth shone brighter than diamonds. And in that ballroom, among the powerful and polished, the quiet storm that was Maya, the delivery girl who had carried more than food, carried life and honor in her hands, became impossible to ignore. And Alexander, watching her, felt the first warmth in years, a human connection that no empire, no chandelier, no boardroom intrigue could ever touch. And together they moved through the room, not as assistant and boss, not as poor and rich, but as two people who had survived storms, literal and metaphorical. And the unspoken bond between them burned bright, a promise of loyalty, respect, and something far more dangerous and beautiful: heart.
The next morning, the city whispered louder than any storm, and the news of Alexander Kane's choice, the delivery girl who had saved his life, now walking by his side at the gala, spread like fire in dry grass, tongues wagging in boardrooms, cafes, and the gilded halls of Falcon Global alike. And inside the glass tower, the air felt colder, heavier, as though the walls themselves disapproved. And the board convened in an emergency meeting, their footsteps sharp on marble, papers rustling like dry leaves, faces set in masks of calculation and concern. But concern only for appearances, for the empire, for the brand, not for hearts or courage. And Mr. Sterling, vice chairman, cold, ambitious, eyes calculating like a hawk circling prey, presided, his voice smooth but sharp as a knife hidden in silk.
"This situation," he said slowly, each word measured, deliberate, "is unacceptable. Alexander Kane, the image of Falcon Global, cannot be seen publicly entangled with someone so unpolished, so unrefined. A delivery girl, for all intents and purposes, is not the companion of a billionaire. Not for our brand, not for the city, not for investors who watch every move." Murmurs spread across the polished table, heads nodding, some reluctantly, some with thinly veiled delight, for here was an opportunity to assert control, to remind the heir that no one, not even him, was above the empire. And they demanded, voices firm, unanimous, that he distance himself, that he remove the threat to Falcon Global's image, that he send her away, quietly, safely, like a weed uprooted from their perfect garden. And Alexander, sitting at the head of the table, tall, steady, yet inside a storm brewed, a storm no boardroom rule could contain. Heart pounding, blood hot, for he had seen her courage, her honesty, her strength, and now the world, the very world he had helped build, polished, protected, dared to treat her as nothing, as a threat to power. And the room leaned closer, demanding, waiting for him to yield. And the silence that followed was thick, heavy, like a shadow over the city, because for the first time, Alexander realized that the fight for heart was far more perilous than the fight for empire, that loyalty, truth, and courage were not measured in profit margins or stock tickers. And in that moment, the board, unaware, underestimated the storm that was about to rise, the quiet fury of a man who would not let the only real person in his life be torn from him for the sake of image.
The city seemed smaller the day Elara Kane arrived. Tall, elegant, her every step measured, every movement a statement of power. A woman who carried the weight of a dynasty on shoulders carved from ice. And she was here for Maya, the girl who had dared to cross into their world, to be seen not as subordinate but as necessary. And the invitation arrived on thick cream paper, embossed with the family crest, formal, polite, yet edged with steel, summoning Maya to tea in the penthouse, a place where the city sprawled beneath glass floors and polished marble, where the sun lit the room but could not warm it. And when Maya entered, heart beating, palms sweating, she was met with the softest of smiles, the kind that cut deeper than a whip. And Elara gestured to the seat across from her, voice smooth, silky, a river hiding rapids beneath. "Maya, you are delightful," she said, tilting her head, eyes sharp, appraising. "Such a pretty face, such simple goodness. It is charming, truly." And Maya felt a flush of unease, yet held her head high, because politeness did not mean weakness. And she nodded, careful, waiting for the storm she knew would follow. "But," Elara continued, leaning in slightly, each word dropping like stones into the quiet, "one cannot ignore what is beneath the surface. Pedigree matters. Education matters. Grace, social skill, refinement, these are the walls of our house. My son has a fascination with helping strays." A venomous smile curling her lips. "It usually passes." And the words were poison wrapped in silk, meant to belittle, to wound, to make Maya shrink. Yet she did not. She met the woman's gaze, steady, eyes bright, unbowed. "I am not here to replace walls, madam," she said softly, firmly. "I am here to do what is right, and right does not depend on pedigree." Ilara's eyes flickered, amusement mingled with irritation, a predator intrigued by the resilience of its prey. And the tea passed between them, fragrant and hot, words laced with honey but lined with steel, conversation dancing on the edge of battle, compliments that cut, praise that wounded. And Maya drank slowly, letting the words settle, holding her ground like the girl who had carried a life through rain.
The days grew heavy, each one pressing on Maya like the humid weight of the rainy season, and she began to notice the cracks, small at first, almost invisible, in the life she had built beside Alexander, the man who had once been untouchable, now showing wear under the pressure of whispers, judgment, and invisible attacks. And she watched him in the office, tall, controlled, graceful, but the lines on his forehead deepened, the sharp angles of his jaw tighter, eyes flicking constantly to his phone, his voice carrying through the glass walls in sudden bursts of anger. And one afternoon she paused outside his door, heart beating, and heard the storm unleashed. Alexander arguing fiercely with his mother, words clipped, sharp. "You cannot dictate this. She is not what you say she is." And the voice of Ilara, smooth, cold, slicing like glass. "Alexander, you are blinded by sentiment. You cannot allow this girl to remain here." And the sound cut her, each syllable a weight pressing down. And Maya felt a hollow ache in her chest, seeing the man she admired so worn, so torn. And she began to see herself differently, reflected in the glass of his office, a faint figure, shoulders straight but shadowed by fear, eyes tired, the delivery girl everyone saw when they whispered behind polished hands and crystal glasses. And she felt herself shrinking, pulling away, the thought whispering in her mind, "Maybe I am a liability. Maybe kindness and efficiency are not enough to protect someone like him. Maybe my heart only brings storms."
Then the storm arrived, in print, cruel, sharp, deliberate. A tabloid spread across the city the next morning, headlines screaming lies, photographs taken without consent, half-truths stitched into venomous narrative. Gold digger, delivery girl stages accident to ensnare naive billionaire. The words clawing at her chest, at her mind, twisting memories of courage and sacrifice into shame and doubt. And she sat in the small apartment she had managed to keep, trembling hands holding the paper, eyes wet, heart aching, the world outside oblivious to the war inside her soul. And she realized something she had long resisted. The fight was no longer just about surviving. It was about how much she could bear before it broke her, before she lost herself in someone else's story. The next morning, before the sun could rise fully, before the city awoke to gossip and rumor, she walked into Falcon Global, quiet, measured, heart heavy, and left a letter on Alexander's desk, folded simply, the words written in ink that trembled just slightly. "I am grateful for everything you have given me, but I cannot bring this storm to your door. You deserve peace. I am sorry." And she walked out, each step echoing in her chest, back into the city she had known, the streets that smelled of wet asphalt and possibility, the life she had carved with courage and sweat, carrying only the weight of her own truth, her pride, and the ache of leaving someone she had come to care for more deeply than she could say, knowing the storm she had run from was not finished, but trusting that hearts, like the city after rain, could heal, could survive, could rise again.
The office was quiet, too quiet, the usual hum of Falcon Global replaced by the weight of absence. The chair across from Alexander empty, the papers untouched. And on the polished desk lay a simple folded note, the handwriting unmistakable, familiar. And his eyes went straight to it, scanning the words, feeling them pierce deeper than any boardroom attack, any whispered criticism, any empire he had built. And for the first time, true anger rose, not at a rival, not at a competitor, not at the petty cruelty of business, but at the injustice, the sharp unfairness of it all, and at himself for not protecting her, for letting the storm rage unchecked, for believing that efficiency, kindness, and courage alone could shield someone from the world's cruelty. And he understood in that moment, with the paper trembling slightly in his fingers, that money, power, prestige, they were meaningless if he could not keep the one person who was real in his life, the one person who had seen him, who had seen the man behind the empire. And that realization set fire to something he could no longer ignore.
He rose from the desk with purpose, abandoning the board meeting mid-discussion, leaving his phone behind, leaving protocol, leaving appearances, and he drove himself into the city he had long flown above in glass towers, into the old streets, the neighborhoods Maya had once navigated with her bike, past vendors and rickety buildings, past rain-streaked windows and puddles reflecting neon, guided only by memory, by the stories she had told him of this city, of its heart, of the small moments that mattered more than any empire. And he stopped at a fruit vendor's cart, the scent of mango and oranges mixing with the damp air, and called out, breathless, "Do you know a girl named Maya? She reads books to children on Sundays, lives somewhere nearby." And the vendor's face broke into a grin, recognition bright in his eyes. I know her. The girl who gathers the little ones in the square, tells them stories, keeps them laughing while the rains fall. She lives not far from here. Follow the alley, past the old well, third building on the right. You can't miss her." And Alexander ran, heart pounding, following the directions as if each step could erase the time she had been gone. And there she was, in her cramped apartment, boxes half-packed, walls bare but warm with memory, hands paused mid-motion, eyes red-rimmed but fierce, defiant even in exhaustion. And she froze, surprise flaring, not expecting him, not expecting the storm of the world to pause for her. And he did not make speeches, he did not bend the city to prove a point. He simply knelt on the worn floor beside her, showing her the tabloid, the cruel words, the lies, the world's attempt to make her small. And he spoke softly, deeply, with the weight of truth and fire in his voice. "Maya, this isn't a storm you brought to my door. This is a storm I brought to yours. They are attacking you because they are afraid of courage, afraid of truth, afraid of the heart that refuses to bend. And they are afraid because they know that you are the best thing that's ever happened to me." Her chest heaved, breath catching, eyes wide, and in that small, cluttered room, with boxes and memories around them, with rain streaking the windows and the city humming far below, the world shrank to this single truth. Courage had met love, honesty had met loyalty, and the storm that had raged outside was nothing compared to the one building between them, trust, unspoken, raw, and unyielding. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension and unspoken fear, and Alexander sat across from Maya, eyes steady, voice low but firm, carrying the weight of storms past and battles yet to come. "I am not asking you to come back just to endure it, Maya. That would be cruel, and you deserve more than that," he said, his fingers tapping lightly on the polished wood. "I am asking you to fight. They want you to be a quiet, poor delivery girl who runs away. They think your courage will bend under the weight of their world. So let us show them. Show them exactly who you are." Maya listened, heart hammering, mind spinning, and for a moment the city outside seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in a quiet world where trust and truth met. And slowly, together, they began to weave a plan not for the board, not for whispers behind closed doors, but for the city itself, for the eyes that had watched that rainy night, the phones that captured courage, for every soul that had ever been a bystander, frozen, afraid, or unsure of what was right. And they spoke of a press conference, a gathering that would rip through the false stories, the lies, the whispers, like the first rains breaking the dry season. And Maya felt a fire stir within her, a quiet certainty that the storm could be faced head-on.
The day arrived, sun hidden behind clouds heavy with promise, and the city's media gathered, buzzing with expectation. Cameras angled, microphones poised, questions sharp as knives. And in the back, Mr. Sterling and Ilara Kane stood, eyes narrowed, smirks playing on their lips, confident, certain that Alexander would yield, that he would bow to protocol, to power, to fear. And instead, he stepped to the podium with calm, with the stillness of a river before it turns into rapids, and he did not read a prepared statement. He did not bow to the scripts of the press. He simply began to speak, voice steady, eyes scanning the room, and he told the story of a rainy night when the city streets became rivers of chaos, when a crash rang out, metal screaming against concrete, and a crowd gathered, phones held high, flashing lights like stars in the storm. And in the midst of it all, one young woman, a delivery girl, did not hesitate, did not consider her pay or her fear, but saw a human being in need and acted. And he projected the videos behind him, the scene unfolding once more, the faces, the rain, the silence of those who watched, and then the one figure who moved, the one who reached out when no one else would. And he paused, letting the weight of the truth settle. And then he said, voice rising but controlled, "That woman, Maya, lost her job because she saved my life. The people attacking her now are the same as the people filming that night. They watch, they comment, but they never help. Maya is not my shame, she is my honor." The boardrooms fell silent, the whispered schemes unraveling like fragile threads in the hands of the truth. And one by one, the plans of Sterling, sharp and cold as a winter wind, were exposed, his ambition undone quietly, efficiently, while Ilara Kane, poised and elegant as always, watched the storm she had tried to command slip from her grasp. And for the first time, she saw what she had not seen before. The light in her son's eyes, genuine, unforced, the kind of joy that could not be bought, measured, or controlled. And with a faint smile, cold but resigned, she offered truce, her voice carrying the weight of concession. "So it be. But know this, Alexander, happiness has its own price." And he nodded, not in arrogance, but in relief, feeling the burden of expectation lift just a little, as the city outside carried on, oblivious to the battles that had raged within towers of glass and steel. And Maya, she did not step into a palace, she did not wear jewels, she did not walk down aisles of gold and velvet. Instead, she sat at a desk in a bright office, modest but alive, head of the Falcon Global Foundation, the work she had long dreamed of, the work that mattered. And with Alexander by her side, visiting often, she poured her heart into neighborhoods that had shaped her, funding after-school programs, community centers, safe spaces for children who, like her once, knew hunger, struggle, and dreams that seemed too far to reach. And Alexander watched, learning to see the city as she had always seen it, not through the cold towers of business or the sharp angles of glass, but through the streets, the people, the small acts of courage that built worlds unseen by most. Years passed, the seasons turning, rains falling as they always did, and one night, on a street slick with water and neon reflections, they were driving home, quiet, content, when a small figure appeared, a young delivery boy on a scooter, wheels skidding, hot food flying across the wet road, and a crowd forming, phones raised, lights flashing, recording, but doing nothing to help. And in an instant, Maya and Alexander were out of the car, moving as one, calm and determined, rushing to lift the dazed boy, steadying him, brushing rain from his face, while their driver held an umbrella, shielding them from the storm. And the boy looked up, fear giving way to wonder, seeing a kindly woman and a tall man who did not hesitate, who did not pause for cameras or applause, who acted because it was right. And in that moment,
moment, the crowd still filming, the scene was a perfect echo of the night it had all begun, of courage over indifference, and the legend of the girl from the rain had grown, whispered from street corners to offices, a reminder that the greatest wealth is not gold, not power, not fame, but a heart that stops, a hand that reaches, a soul brave enough to rise in the rain for a stranger.